Welcome. Good morning. I'm Bart Polson, and I am here today joined by Germaine McDonald, and we're here to talk to you about data and finance and investing and how you can combine these different but very deeply connected worlds. Now, some of you will be joining us live right now. Thank you for being here. And if you are here live right now, I'm going to invite you to make a comment, say hello, and tell us where you're located. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States. And Germaine, where are you?
I'm in Kingston, Jamaica.
Okay, so this is my first international guest broadcast. Um, Germaine and I are both authors for LinkedIn Learning, where we've each made courses that have to do with data and in the finance world. But mostly we're going to have Germaine has a lot more experience talking about some of the individual elements of this and consulting with people in this. And so we're going to spend a lot of time hearing about his experience and how this works. Germaine also is the co-founder and CEO of Learn, Grow, Invest, or at learngrowinvestclub.com. And hopefully you'll be talking about that some more today.
Yeah.
But if you're out there, and if you're able to, please put in comments, say hello, and tell us where you are. Oh, we actually have. We've got Talk to David in India, and got TM in St. Anne's, Bob Marley Parish.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and I'm sure since we're also streaming to our platforms here on Learn, Grow, Invest, feel free to say hi. Our community members should be watching, so looking forward to who joins us live.
Well, let me start by talking a little bit. So I've been making courses for LinkedIn Learning for 13 years, and I have done at least 2 iterations of one course I have that is called the Data Science of Economics, Banking, and Finance, which we updated just 3 months ago. I have other courses that I've done that are relevant to this. For instance, my data mining courses, there's one for R and one for Python that talk about things like time series forecasting, which is an extremely important task in financial world where you're trying to predict what's going to happen to something over time, like the change of a value of a stock or other commodity.
Yeah.
And I have other course about it's funny is I don't always remember what my own courses are called. Actionable insights in business practice. Yeah, I've got a collection now that I'm able to put through. And Germaine, now I have worked making these courses, and I have done consulting work. I have worked with very small local organizations, tiny little nonprofits that were in a 10-foot by 10-foot office. I have also worked with global service organizations and actually I've worked with Visa, with global financial companies, and even with the US federal government. And so I've done lots of different kinds of consulting with different organizations. And I know, Germaine, that you've got some really rich experience in these fields also. So I'm hoping you could take a few minutes, introduce yourself, tell us a little more about the course you've made for LinkedIn, really about Learn, Grow, Invest, and about your own experience in the financial world.
All right, sure. So thanks again for the opportunity, Bart. It was great connecting with you a few months ago on our All Hands for LinkedIn Learning Instructors. So my background started really in tech. So I started a computer sales and service company back when I was in high school. So that was 24 years ago. And that started really just repairing PCs, installing software, and doing the things that really come with that. Then I made a transition in 2014 to work for Microsoft Jamaica. So there is a Microsoft here in Jamaica. And so I started there as an intern. And then that's when I really got exposed to really focusing on software from a sales and distribution level, right? So when I was doing it in terms of just repairing PCs. My focus was really installing software, troubleshooting software. But then I got moved to working with partners, working with large clients, focusing on growing the sales business for Microsoft in the region. And then I moved to a role that was technical account manager, which is now supporting those large organizations. So I did that for a while, and then I realized that I wanted to get some other areas of exposure. So I looked for another role actually within the same ecosystem. I went to a Microsoft partner, and my focus was now working directly with clients. And that's when I found that was something I really enjoyed. When I was doing support, I was really just putting out fires every day. We weren't really planning ahead. We weren't solving the type of problems that I wanted to solve. And so working with clients directly, I found to really, that was really fun. And then I got an opportunity to become a Power BI trainer. And then it was just, downhill for me from there, meaning I loved it so much. I love working with data. I love doing analysis on companies, because it so happens that around that time, just a few years back, we started L.E.A.R.N, Grow, Invest. And L.E.A.R.N, Grow, Invest really was started to help persons to understand how to manage their finances better, with a focus and emphasis on investing. So we would teach people every month how to invest, how to manage their money, how to make better financial decisions. So of course, if you combine my love for Power BI and teaching and training with my love for investing, this is really, a topic I can speak about for hours.
That's
so what
beautiful.
we do now, what we do primarily for L.E.A.R.N, Grow, Invest now is that we serve two audiences, or really three. So we work with individuals who want to still, again, manage their money well. We give them tools like, spreadsheets in Excel. We give them our academy as a resource for content and videos that they can consume. We work with companies that are listed on the local stock exchange. If they want to help to engage their investors, process information, do some sort of analysis on the market, etc. We'll help them with that. And then we have a side where we go into companies and do training. So that's the meat of what L.E.A.R.N, Grow, Investors now. Very big on outreach. So we do free classes on investing. We just try to help people to learn more about, making better financial decisions. How that ties into data is that we really try to encourage data-driven decisions, right? So we're very big on research. We're very big on analyzing companies, their financial statements, seeing what's happening in terms of the company. What's company's story from a financial perspective, because that is going to tell you where the company's potential lies, right? So you don't really invest for the present or the past. You're investing for the future. So when you look at a company's profit and loss, for example, how are sales doing? Are they increasing? How are their expenses, right? Have they grown so much that their admin expenses are too much, so that it's stifling profits? Those are the things we're looking at, because that's going to tell us how they'll perform in the next 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. Because the more money they're able to make, then the more investors will likely want to buy more of that company, the more profit you'll make as an investor. So those are the kind of things we're looking at. We want to take in as much data as we can with companies. There's never too little data. And so we try to just take in as much as we can as a part of our research. And then we try to just, process that data in a meaningful way. Of course, we have to combine that data that we have with the qualitative stuff, right? And I know you've spoken about this before, because the data is a piece of it, right? It's a very important piece. We can do analysis, forecasting, etc. But there's also a qualitative side that we can't necessarily measure easily, but still important in the investment decision.
That's
So
wonderful.
just, yeah.
Well, so you actually have a really broad range of experience here with what you're doing, and it it reminds me of some of the paradoxes I've had to deal with, and that is, I have made courses that talk about sometimes very advanced topics. We talk about neural networks for forecasting, and it's a very fancy thing. And on the other hand, in my consulting work and in most of my courses on these topics, I spend a lot of time going like, let's bring it down, down,
Yeah.
down. We're dealing with something very, very basic. I mean, you talked about profit and loss. And I know for a lot of people who own a company, they may not even have, a profit and loss, a P&L statement. But that's just, you can do that in a single spreadsheet, and it's really easy because basically we're going to find what's coming in and what's going out, and
Yeah.
hopefully we have something left over. And what I found, especially when working with a lot of the nonprofits I've done, is the analysis that we're ultimately doing for them is so simple. We're
Yeah.
making some bar charts, we're making some line charts, maybe a pivot table, and because a lot of these organizations are operating in either a data-free environment or
Yeah.
very, very limited data. And so you talk about, in one sense, there's no such thing as too much data especially when you're working in the financial world. So what's your own experience, both in the consulting work that you have done, and in the people you've been working with at Learn, Grow, Invest?
So I'll just say before I answer that, it's the amount of information a company has in my experience is seldom used to its full potential. And I find that the persons making the decisions, they actually want a lot of information, but they want it in a very simple way. So it's this weird thing where they want to know everything, but if you give them everything, then they can't make a decision. So you have to really give them just enough that is relevant for them to be able to make a decision in a meaningful way. And this works
You
for
may
all
be
levels.
familiar. You may be familiar. There was a little truism. I made LinkedIn's first big data course back when that was a term people still use, but the little truism was, big data exists to create small data.
Yeah.
You're starting with
Yeah.
a gargantuan amount, but really you need to bring it down to a human level. So I think that's
And
related to what.
that's the basis of what we do when we teach people how to use Power BI, because it really comes down to, so as an analyst, for example, your priority is to figure out what the business needs in order to keep moving forward, keep making money, keep being competitive. And there's this challenge that you'll have as an analyst, because how the business communicates that to you may lead you to believe that you need to present everything to them. But that's not necessarily true, because as an owner as well, there is certain pieces of information that are more valuable to me. Right. So for example, we mentioned profitability. A lot of small business owners don't know how much money they're making. So they can't make any decisions like how to price, what expenses to cut. They don't necessarily know even how much they owe. So in terms of the work that we do from the companies that we work with, so most of them now are listed companies. So there are certain requirements, and of course,
Right.
once you're listed, you're generating a certain amount of revenues, and likely you're profitable, right? Because otherwise, your stock price will be won't be good if you're
Although,
not
as
profitable.
we've learned with Silicon Valley here in the U.S., there is
Yeah.
often this incredible disjuncture between stock price and profitability. I mean, we have major companies that are still not profitable, that they're just
Yeah.
surviving on this constant fire hose of investor
Yes.
cash.
Yes. And we know, I mean, we saw that for Amazon for many years, that they weren't profitable. They were still, they're probably one of the highest priced stocks on the market. But so in terms of what we try to do with companies, I'll speak about it from just some of the things that I've seen. So what companies want to be able to do is, so usually we'll go in and we'll speak to either the BI team, that's it, the business intelligence team, or we may talk to maybe some of the business leaders. And what they're trying to do really is usually revamp what they're already doing. So I really don't do a lot of brand new projects. I've always wanted to do, one from scratch, meaning brand new implementation of like Power BI. But most of the times I'm coming in when either the team needs to be trained and there may be some dashboards that they want to revamp. So there's usually an issue. The first issue that I usually see is how the data is coming in. So usually we have multiple systems.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, you have custom built systems that some companies may be using for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And so what you'll usually find is that companies are piecing data together. So they have their maybe their sales system, then they have an Excel workbook with some data, then they have some in a third party application, and they're trying to bring all of these together. Now the first problem there is, of course, is that that data is not likely structured in a way that it makes them readily compatible, right? So there's usually some amount of work that needs to be done. There's usually
A
some
lot of
errors
it.
in terms of how that data is captured, because you may have, the customer name being one way here, it's maybe spelled slightly differently over here, or there's usually some amount of work that we need to do to kind of clean up that.
I'm actually going to follow up. I'm going to say that's where most of the work is. The
Yes,
rule,
yes.
the rule,
I'm trying to make it sound easy.
no, seriously, if for those of you who are watching here, the rule of thumb is that any data project, 80% of the time is spent
Yeah.
simply preparing the data.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
when you have large data sets that have been assembled over time, you have enormous compatibility issues. And again, you talk about spelling names differently. Whether somebody spells avenue as a word or AVE, the computer doesn't know that those mean the same thing.
Yep.
I recently I encountered a very quick episode of learning that in the UK they write dates differently than they do in the US.
Yes. Yes.
That created
Yes.
a little bit of confusion, but we got it sorted out within about 2 minutes. But there, if you're working in R, there's an entire package called Lubridate just for dealing with date information,
Yeah.
because it gets and especially in finance, because you need to know exactly when this particular thing happened, and you have to deal with time zones and daylight savings and date encodings. Anyhow, so I just wanted to say, if somebody's looking for a career, you can make a career just being the person who is assembling the data. I mean, you're
Yes.
sort of a data engineer at that point. But yeah, there's a lot of work there. And it's not something to be said like, well, we'll spend the morning, get this together, and then we'll spend the next 3 weeks. No, it's you spend 3 weeks getting the data together,
Yeah.
and then you spend a few days on the analysis. But anyhow, so I
Yeah.
just wanted to interrupt and say the data prep is, and it's crucial.
Yeah.
You can have, let's all, you may not remember 10 or 15 years ago, NASA sent a probe out to Mars that crashed because they did not change some of the units were in imperial units and some of the units were in metric.
Yeah.
Nobody caught it. That led to engineering failures, and it crashed. Anyhow,
Yeah.
but back to you.
Yeah. So that piece is extremely important, and if there are companies watching, that's where I really encourage that you spend most of the time, right? I'll work with companies to say, let's focus on how the data is being captured, how the data is being stored. Simple things like just ensuring that you are collecting the data in a way that is as accurate as possible, as clean as possible, because that's going to impact how much work you have to do to prepare those reports for analysis. So the benefit, for example, in working with, again, a listed company, so when we're analyzing data for investing purposes, the good thing is the type of data that we're looking at is usually presented in the financial statements, and it's clean. So we have to do some amount of work to kind of prepare it for the type of analysis we want. But the good thing is that data goes through a process before you see it in that quarterly report or that annual report. So that's a great thing about it. So in terms of the data that I've had to analyze in that way, it's usually us now, well, just figuring out how we want to present that data. And because of the work that the companies do to get that information out to you, that's not as much work.
Yep.
From within the companies now, they're going to do most of the work, right? So if you're working with, let's say, a small company, maybe you're trying to manage this data on your own, I would just focus on the touch points that the data is coming in through. You want to ensure that there's some sort of uniformity if you have multiple systems, how that data is being captured. And then once we have the data, regardless of the form, SQL database, Excel spreadsheet, it doesn't matter. We can work with that.
Yep. Now
and
let
then
me ask you a question quickly. The course that you have made for LinkedIn, actually, I want to share my screen for just a moment.
Yeah.
If I can figure out how to do that. Here we go. We're going to share screen, and I'm going to try to do, let me do this window for just a moment. Let's see if that works.
Yeah.
Great. So, by the way, this is the homepage for Learn, Grow, Invest Club. And this, I believe, is your wife. Is that correct?
Yes. My wife of 15 years. So I'm sure she's in the chat somewhere. So
wonderful. Well, thank you. But I also wanted to show you, Germaine has made a course for LinkedIn Learning on Power BI. Now, I'll admit that 3 years ago, I was not familiar with Power BI. I think I had heard the word, I knew it existed, but I'd never worked with it, and I didn't know people who worked with it. And then that's because I come from the social sciences, and I worked first with SPSS, and then I worked with R. So I have some experience with other programs. I have demonstrated some of them in my LinkedIn Learning courses, but Power BI was a new one to me. And then a couple of years ago, I did a major data project where I was consulting with a global energy company, and it turned out that most of their people worked on Power BI. And so what I want to know is, can you explain, we actually only have 7 minutes left, but I was hoping you could explain a little bit about why you are emphasizing Power BI, what strengths you think it brings to people working with financial data. And I will stop sharing this window.
Okay.
So
sure. So the process that we were talking about before in terms of that data needing to be transformed, that's usually the first step. So let me introduce a workflow pretty much in Power BI. So Power BI is great. So if you're an Excel user, you really should look into Power BI. If you don't do any type of data analysis at all in terms of you're a small business owner or you have a large organization, Power BI is great to just be able to make business and meaningful decisions from a high level, right? So let me just drop that in there. When we're working with data in Power BI, the first thing we do is connect to our data sources. So these are the applications that have our sales transactions or HR data, employee data, so on and so forth. Once we connect to those data sources, we need to ensure that data goes through some amount of transformation to make it ready to create what we call the data model, right? I'm not going to get into the technical term right now, but once we have that in place, really what we're doing is creating relationships between the different tables that have our data. Once that is done, that's where my course comes in. So my course speaks about how to do calculations on that data. Because let's say that we want to calculate now our profit and loss. That's a simple calculation. If we want to know our profits, we simply are just taking our income or revenue, and we're deducting expenses. That's simply enough. But an organization may have maybe complex calculations. Like I did some work with an insurance company, and the way they calculate, for example, the cost of their insurance is very complex. So you can create your own calculations using DAX. So that's what my course covers: how to get started with DAX, how to do your calculations, the different functions we have in DAX, and it's a very powerful tool, and it will give you the flexibility you need to create the type of calculations that make sense for you. Now, a calculation is simply an algorithm that says to get this outcome, we take these steps. So that's all that is. When we do that, the next thing we do is now our data is ready to be reported. So we're using Power BI to add visuals to our report, and there are maybe 50 or more basic visualizations that you can leverage, and there are some complex ones as well. And from there, we just craft those reports based on what our objective is, right? What decision we're trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
So if I just want to see a number for profit, I can do a simple card and say, show me the profit for 2023, and it will give me that data. If I want to see my last 5 years of profit, I can do a column chart that shows each of the last 5 years, and I can see that data. So that's really, Power BI is extremely powerful. It's easy to use in terms of a drag and drop perspective in terms of the reporting. Where you may need some help is really now the data prep, as we were talking about before, because if you're not familiar with that side, then you should get some help, and that's where I would come in, of course. And the great thing about Power BI, it's free for single use. So as an individual, I can download Power BI for free, do my own dashboards, do my own charts as I need to. Where the payment comes in is if I don't want to share that dashboard with you, you would need what's called a pro license. It's still very affordable, maybe $15 per month, and you're good, right? So it's very powerful. So I was first someone who really loved Excel. Then when I learned about Power BI, I was like, it's hard to choose. They're both great, but I spend a lot of time bringing data from Excel into Power BI, right?
Yep.
So that's the high level snapshot of what you can do with Power BI. It's extremely powerful, and it's really now the next step you would have is to try and build that culture of kind of using data in the right way within your organization, right? And that starts through every department that touches that data. And we try to encourage companies to not look at the process of creating the dashboards as this one-off thing, but it's an iterative process where we're trying to get better at it, trying to ensure that the data is giving us the right information. Where most projects like that will fail is when the business owner or the decision maker can't trust the data that they're seeing in the report. That's where like maybe more than half of the projects will just grind to a halt. Because if I'm looking at the report and the report says we did 10 million in sales, but I look at my accounting software and it says 12 million, I'm not going to trust your report that you've sent to me. And then the project is going to lose momentum, and then it's not going to go anywhere, right? So there's this kind of battle between sometimes the BI team and management, where you'll find that they're not really using the systems to their full potential because there's no trust in terms of what is finally presented. So
thank you so much for. I love that you're emphasizing the need for trust there, because I find that so much of the success of a data project depends on really the human elements.
yes,
Are you understanding their needs? Are you understanding their motivations? And the trust is important. Now, our time is nearly up, but I do want to finish by stating one interesting thing for those of you who are watching this live or in the recording. It may not be obvious, but Germaine and I both, while we have excellent professional backgrounds and things, a lot of what we've learned to do with data is stuff that we have developed over time. My PhD is in social psychology. I have learned to work with data on my own. And Germaine talked about his own experience and going from this project to that project to that project, developing it. And I know for a lot of people out there in the data world, they think that they have to go get a degree in data science, which still hardly anybody offers. There are so many different ways to get to it, including starting with something that you care about and then developing over time. With that, I'm going to wrap up by simply saying one more time. You can find Germaine and his wife at learngrowinvestclub.com. You can find his course on LinkedIn. I have many courses I have courses on LinkedIn Learning that are specific to finance and also general to data and data mining, which would be very helpful. But with that, our time is up. And so, people, thank you so much for joining us. And Germaine, thank you so much for taking the time out of your morning to join me here.
It was a pleasure.
And
Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, and we should certainly do a part two, Bart. This was fun.
all right. Thank you so much.